Hi there, welcome to this week midweek market analysis. So as usual, what we're gonna do over here is walk you through some of the updates that we have. So from a fundamental news perspective, we do have an upcoming CPI data from the US. That's definitely going to be very crucial. Okay, and the expectation over here is a 5% release. So the actual data, any kind of strong deviation, whether is it lower or higher, definitely it's gonna give us some volatility in the dollar related. Okay, and then of course tomorrow we have the Bank of England rate statement, so that will be also pretty important, especially in some of the pound pairs that you may be trading. Now with that said, and having that in mind, okay, let's take a look at the technical analysis portion. Now dollar index right now is developing a very nice little corrective structure. Okay, so what you see over here is we do have an impulse push followed by a correction, which is pretty decent from a kind of like perspective of time. And of course the market is actually reacting off that 50% pullback, which is decent as well. So moving forward from here, combining with the upcoming CPI data, okay, if we can get a very nice confluence, we do expect the dollar to actually continue falling, especially from this technical pattern perspective. So perhaps what we can see here is if you get a surprise for CPI data to the downside, which means coming out less than 5%, there's a good chance that what Powell has said with regards to inflation being still a key concern may start to drop, and from there on, traders will start to anticipate that, oh, since inflation is not that concerning, we might start to look for maybe stalling of interest rate, the peak of it, or even potentially cutting, right? And that would start to see maybe the sell-off of the dollar. Okay, so that's the current perspective that I have. Right, so do keep an eye on it. Now, a little bit of a kind of like breaking out of that correlation aspect here is the euro. Okay, because from a technical pattern perspective, the dollar index and the euro dollar is kind of showing us very different perspective, right? So euro dollar here, we can see this pattern development seems to suggest that we may start to see a downside. Okay, yes, this may even push up a little bit, break that high, but overall if you still see a rejection, this doesn't really change the entire piece. Okay, so overall right now, we're still maintaining a neutral perspective. I want to give it more time to wait for a confirmation, right? Simply because while the technical pattern suggests downside, but looking at more perspective, such as the dollar index correlation, okay, I will be a bit more patient on this setup here. So one way to look at it is maybe post CPI, if we kind of get a corrective structure, developing something like this, okay, then I'll be more interested to sell. Or alternatively, if the CPI comes out and we kind of get a break below it, okay, following that maybe a correction at the bottom, that would also give me a sell setup. Okay, so euro dollar here, we may or may not get a potential trade this week, but the idea here is to wait for some sign of confirmation, wait for more clarity before we commit to the trade. Okay, pound dollar here is continuing in the direction that we are looking at, but of course the move is just not as fast. It's kind of like slow, taking some time. But overall here, we're still expecting it to push a little bit higher, especially if this just develop into a correction like that. Okay, we can expect a little bit more upside. One thing to note, of course, is if you have any buy, my suggestion is to be managing that buy position more aggressively. The reason is because it does not need to always come to the top. It can basically just do a little bit more and then just reverse from there on. We are already starting to see some kind of a huge divergence building up, and anyway this structure is not like very impulsive, right? As I mentioned, it's going up but it's slow. So any buy position that you have, my suggestion is just trail your stop pretty aggressively. Okay, I mean if you got in somewhere around that 618 as we have analyzed, my suggestion is just to shift stops to this recent low, maybe just a little bit below it, and of course if the market just reverse just get out with whatever profits that you have. Okay, so that's on the pound dollar perspective, quite straightforward. Then we have the Aussie dollar over here. Now Aussie dollar, as of today, okay, we kind of see this as a true wave move to this point, a true wave pullback, and then of course a true wave move up. So as long as the market is developing in trees and respecting this channel here, overall we may still see a little bit more downside, right? So of course, for now, my initial projection is not all the way back to the bottom of the channel, but if we can get a decent rejection here, maybe a little bit of this kind of move, okay, we can expect a deeper pullback at least towards that 50, and then maybe this might still bounce, right? And then this will give us the bigger move. So if you're aggressive, okay, what you can really look into is around that 6775, 6780. Do look for a rejection, look for a potential sell against the invalidation level here, okay, and your target will be around like 6690. Okay, so kind of pretty decent risk reward anyway. So this one here may come to us either today, with CPI data. I just want to take note of that as well, whether you are comfortable with it, or it may come to us later part of this week. Okay, so this trade here, do pay attention. I think within the week itself we may get something. Okay, then update on dollar Canadian. Dollar Canadian right now here, overall the structure remains intact. So what we have is a 1, 2, 3. This is wave 4 potentially still developing, and then we expect one more drop. Okay, so the bias is definitely bearish. Definitely look for sell opportunity. I seldom trade the wave 4, okay, which means that I seldom ride on this, and if I were to ride on that, I want to be a bit more patient, which means this itself, yes, it came into the territory of that, but I wouldn't want to be jumping in immediately. I would personally wait for a pullback, another push up. I want to see a very clear three wave structure. Okay, so that's a little bit more conservative on my side. I may miss it as well, because if let's say this just drops, again, it can do that because it has come into that wave 4 territory. I would just let it go, right? So again, back to your trading plan, into your strategy, what is the technique and approach that you use, right? But overall direction here, as long as we're still seeing this clear structure, we're expecting more downside on the dollar Canadian. And then we have the dollar yen. Dollar yen is also doing a very clear structure as of now. Ideally, of course, we want to see a little bit pullback and then another pushback up to give us that three wave, so we get an impulse correction, and then somewhere around this zone to look for a sell. That will be very, very decent. Okay. One thing to note, of course, the market is not always perfect, which means this can easily just do something like that, tag it, and just drop. Okay, and this can still be that structure of a correction. So dollar yen here, I think quite similar to the Aussie dollar. You may want to keep a close watch because we may get something within the week. Okay, so look at sell opportunities around this zone, and the invalidation, of course, is this high here. Pretty far off, but for a swing trade, it's okay. It's like 100 plus pips. If you think that this is a little bit too wide, what you can do is, of course, you can go to a lower time frame, maybe look for a candlestick formation on a H1, okay, or a tiny crawl pattern on a H1, and then you take that setup, okay, you execute the setup based on that. Okay, so then your risk will be slightly tighter, right? XAU, so go over here, we're expecting more downside. This little pullback may not be the best of all. Okay, so what can happen is maybe this will come down a little bit more, go back a little bit more, to give us that bigger three wave structure before the drop. Okay, so you may need to be a little bit patient, but this can also just fall off, as I mentioned, right? This can be the entire piece of it. So of course, if you're a little bit more aggressive, you can look for a sell within this price range, and of course, if this just comes down correctively and doesn't really break through this strongly, you just manage the position and expect a pushback up and then sell it again. Okay, so that's or go, right? So again, if you're aggressive, I think this week you may get an opportunity. Crude oil, nothing much has changed since the start of the week. Basically still expecting this, so you just wait for the corrective pullback, and then we'll be bullish on that. Okay, so this week nothing much on that. S&P, we did see this little strong bounce off the low at 4045, so we're still basically waiting for a pullback. If you're trading the indices, right, then what you can keep an eye on is around 4097, 4085. The market may come down, within this week. If you can get a rejection here, we are looking for buy trade opportunity, okay, against the invalidation of this previous low. Right, so this one quite clear. That's on the S&P side of things. And then Bitcoin. Okay, so Bitcoin recently came back and tested the 27490, giving us this three-way structure. So we kind of get a stall here. I do have a buy position on Bitcoin here. Okay, ideal structure here is we're gonna want to see a strong bounce within the next 1 or 2 days, right, in the near term, because we want to see a V-shaped formation. Now, if the next 1 or 2 days this just continue to develop something like that, we'll probably get out of that buy and just wait for the next setup. Okay, now the alternative scenario here is this turns into a crawl. Now if that turns into a crawl, then I'll be willing to hold on to that position, because if this is a crawl, this structure is still intact and we're still expecting upside, right? So two ways to look at it. One is ideally we want to just see a bounce. That would be perfect. Okay, alternative is we see a crawl. I'll still be willing to hold on to that. If we see a corrective structure like that, then I'll suggest we'll probably just exit that position and look for the next one. Right, so that's on Bitcoin, and that's on the update for the week. Okay, so all the best, and we'll see you guys again.